Welcome back to News Talk, a special edition of News Talk. We're on State Circle in Annapolis today, and joining us now as we continue to talk about the issues Maryland lawmakers will be dealing with over the course of the 90-day session that begins today is Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. Thank you very much for your time.
We can do it with gloves.
Anything to keep warm on a day as chilly as this. We thank you very much for your time. As you approach this year's session, which is the first session since a very difficult period for your city, what types of conversations will you be having with the governor and other state leaders, and what do you hope to take home when the legislature departs in April?
So one of the things that I saw after the unrest and riots in April was a coming together in a way that we haven't seen in Baltimore in decades. And it was just not people from Baltimore. It was people from all around the state and around the country who understand that the problems and challenges that we have in Baltimore are challenges that urban America faces all throughout our country. I can say that I heard from many legislators that want to find ways to help uplift Baltimore, to make strategic investments so we can improve the quality of life and the trajectory for lives of people in Baltimore. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing those conversations and pushing forward legislation that will help, and a budget that reflects those priorities.
To what extent is the governor there for you now when you pick up the phone, or when there's some way that the city and the state can partner? What's the relationship today?
I was very pleased to stand with Governor Hogan just a few weeks ago as he is supporting our efforts to remove blight in our city. You know that for the past 5 years, I have an internationally recognized blight elimination plan, Vacancy to Value, that has made tremendous strides in making strategic investments in reducing blight and creating green space in our cities. It's been recognized by the Able Foundation as the most ambitious blight elimination plan the city has seen in over 40 years. So for the governor to recognize that plan and to put $25 million in additional demo to really help us to support the work that we're doing, I appreciated being able to stand with him and the lieutenant governor, because they understand that if we're going to continue to grow our neighborhoods, we need stronger partnerships with the state. Following
the events of last summer, state leaders here created a panel to study police-community relations. Two-part question. First, what did they hear? To the extent that citizen input was solicited and received, what did people say about the concerns they have in the community day to day? And to the extent that law enforcement was part of that conversation too, give us a flavor for what was heard.
I'm sure they heard what I heard before the last session, when I came down here and was fighting for reforms to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. I heard very clearly, very loudly from members of the Baltimore community that felt like the police department plays by a different set of rules. There's an uneven playing field. And I was one of the only elected officials in the state to lobby for serious reforms to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, because I heard from my constituents. I think they heard a lot of that same sentiment during the committee hearings that were held over the past few months. And my hope is I won't be a lonely voice for change in Annapolis this session, but there will be more legislators that understand the urgency of this work.
Have community leaders come forward and come together to make sure that communities are never destroyed again, and to the extent that
I think you saw that. We had the motions hearings without any, they were peaceful demonstrations without any destruction or damage in our communities. And I think you saw that after that one horrible night that we had in the city. It was very clear that people, that was not the reflection of the truth of Baltimore. And it was also clear that children didn't want their neighborhoods destroyed, the seniors didn't want their neighborhood destroyed, residents, businesses, we came together to say that would not happen again, and it didn't. It hasn't.
Is there a nervousness about the trials that are underway now and how folks might respond?
I think when there was some apprehension prior to the first trial, I think that it was handled very well. And I think that apprehension, that fear, hopefully has subsided, because people understand that we are prepared for whatever happens. We've increased the amount of communication that we've done with the residents as well as the stakeholders in the city to ensure that they understand what's going on at all times. And we've also made it very clear about our level of preparedness.
One of the first things Senate President Mike Miller said to us when we spoke with him at the top of the hour was budgets, though perhaps boring, dry, they're how a locality or a state or a nation expresses its values. As the people in the building behind us, the governor and the legislative, the members of the legislature craft a budget for next year, how can they help the city of Baltimore?
They can help by taking another look at the education funding that was left on the table during the last session. You know, if Baltimore's children are to reach their promise, we need the financial support from the state, and hopefully Governor Hogan will have a change of heart and release that funding to Baltimore City Public Schools. I know that there's a lot of work around criminal justice reform. That's a big issue in Baltimore and around the country. People want, as often said, a cradle to college pipeline, not a preschool to prison pipeline, and that work can happen in the legislature as well. There are a lot of ways that we can partner together to ensure that all families can look at their children and say that my child will be able to reach their fullest potential. But it takes us working together across the aisle. It takes, pulling some of the politics out and putting the people first.
I don't know to what extent this has been on your radar, but there has been a push in Annapolis for a very long time to mandate ignition interlock, so that people who are driving under the influence for a first time or having done so repeatedly, that they have to install a device in their car that they blow into. They have to be at 0.0 before that key will turn. Some of the members of the Assembly here, one in particular with a lot of influence, have blocked that. Is this the year that bill moves?
I don't know if this is the year. That's up to for the people of the state to decide. If this is an issue that is important to many, they need to have their voices heard. There shouldn't be any serious legislation that one legislator, regardless of their position, should be able to block if it matters to the lives of the people of Maryland.
What other priorities do you and local leaders, the county leaders from the Washington suburbs or others focus on as the scrum that is the 90-day session of the Maryland General Assembly takes place?
So one of the things I'm focused on in my legislative package this year is our tax credit, our annual tax credit for first responders. We know that Baltimore's communities are safer when our first responders live in our neighborhoods. And we also know that the community, I heard loud and clear, wants the police department and the fire department to better reflect the city that they serve. So by having we have legislation that would allow us to give a $2,500 credit, tax credit, property tax credit a year. So this would be a recurring property tax credit for our first responders who live in Baltimore City, and I'm looking forward to being able to bring that home.
Your dad served in a key way here. When I was a reporter covering Annapolis, he was one of the almost larger-than-life figures in the halls of the Maryland State House. Do you feel his presence when you're here?
All the time, all the time. I have such fond memories of coming down, watching him being sworn in for the first time.
How old were you when you would start doing that?
I think I was about 8 or 9 when he got sworn. I think it was like about 78 when he got sworn in. I remember running up and down the halls with my brother, and certainly, I probably have fonder memories than my father's staff has.
A reminder that the opening day of the legislative session, not so much for the heavy lifting, but for the family and just celebrating the fact that Maryland's state democracy is getting back in gear. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, thanks for your time. Thanks for being out in the cold with us. We appreciate your time. We're back with a program note after this.